is that we didn't win the war. We lost it, and we lost it.
I kind of think I would be against it.
I feel so bad about it because Vietnam is such a beautiful country.
Quiet. A few bunkers uncovered, then a quick lunch.
As the Christmas bombing.
Vietnamese troops entered the city.
Chiến tranh Việt Nam đã kết thúc từ năm 1975 và vẫn luôn là một phần trong tâm trí của mỗi người dân Việt Nam chúng ta. Thế nên dĩ nhiên chiến tranh Việt Nam là một phần tất yếu trong chương trình giáo dục lịch sử Việt Nam. Vậy thì ở Mỹ, quốc gia tham chiến tại chiến tranh Việt Nam, người ta dạy những gì cho học sinh của nước họ? Mình đã từng là du học sinh Mỹ và mình được biết dù ít hay nhiều thì tại Mỹ, học sinh Mỹ cũng được dạy về chiến tranh Việt Nam. Vậy thì hôm nay mình quyết định mời những bạn người Mỹ của mình để lắng nghe những quan điểm, những ý kiến của họ về chiến tranh Việt Nam mọi người nhé. Mình là PD của kênh 8 giờ sáng và hôm nay đây là lần đầu tiên mình xuất hiện trên kênh. Mọi người ủng hộ mình nhé.
Hello, I'm Osawa from the channel Osawa. My English name is April, and I work as a YouTuber in South Korea.
Hi there, my name is Jonah. I am an architecture graduate living in Texas. I started a little volunteer organization called After You, which you can check out.
Hi everyone, my name is Sara. I'm an American and I'm living here in Seoul, South Korea as an English teacher.
The average American person probably knows Vietnam is in Asia. You know, we're not very geographically inclined in my experience. That's not everyone, but most people I know. I would say due to the rise of popularity in Vietnamese food, we're starting to learn more about the culture there and how it can be beautiful and absolutely vibrant.
So I would say that the average American probably knows a few things, maybe not much more than a few dates and maybe a few notable people.
I personally don't know a whole lot about Vietnam. I know where it is. Here in Korea, there's actually a lot of Vietnamese foods. I really like the food. I think the average American probably doesn't know a whole lot except for maybe the Vietnam War. I'm not totally sure, but I think Vietnam was probably fighting for independence and to have like a unified government. And the United States, I think, was more so involved because we were really against communism, especially at that time. I think it was coming off the Cold War with Russia.
From what I understand, the Vietnamese perspective was a little bit about resistance to colonization, maybe by the French, and maybe on the Americans' part, it was tackling that resistance that they thought might have gotten out of hand. I think for the American side, it was probably a little bit of a standing point of like, we won't tolerate communism or Soviets in these parts of the world.
I know that the Vietnam War was really related to the Red Scare, the spread of communism across the Asian continent. I don't know that it was necessarily about Vietnam in particular. I don't think you guys really did anything wrong. I think my country was just kind of freaking out about, oh no, communism. And we decided to make it our business to affect your country with those viewpoints.
I think that in school, Americans typically spend maybe a chapter or like 6 or 7 paragraphs on the Vietnam War. It might be grouped into something bigger, like the Cold War or like things around the Cold War. And so specifics, it'd probably just have a few battles. I think mostly we don't learn about the Vietnam War as much as it's like the effects that the war had on America and our society.
Can you tell me why Americans don't know so much about the Vietnam War, even though I think it's considered one of the biggest, the longest suffering war that the US has ever participated in, other than the Afghanistan war?
I think it's kind of a funny little thing because America's history is really intertwined with the history of a lot of other countries. Because of that, there is so much there that I think that when people are making American history courses, they just kind of pack little summaries of everything together and just move on with the next lesson. And the Vietnam War is part of that because people want to learn about the Cold War. They want to learn about the Cuban Missile Crisis. People in America generally know that it was important, but just our education system doesn't prioritize it as much.
So we don't learn as many details about what was happening in Vietnam at the time. And each school district has its own curriculum and things change. And definitely our education, you know, every system has its biases. We end up learning a bit more about how it affected our country rather than necessarily what it was about over there. I know that we learned about things like Agent Orange and some other really awful things that maybe we did over there. I would say mostly we learn it from the perspective of the protesters who were against it.
Our education system isn't like very equal in terms of what we cover, but I know myself personally, I think we studied that part of US history, like the more modern years, for one semester in high school. I remember learning about Ho Chi Minh and the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the US bombing in Vietnam and Laos. In America, I think a lot of people were nervous to teach about the Vietnam War because it was so controversial. But I think my teacher actually did a good job of highlighting some of the reasons Americans were against the war and why it was kind of controversial.
Well, I want to state first, I was not there, and I don't personally know anyone who was there, so I wouldn't say that I am a super knowledgeable person.
Yeah.
But the information that I have that makes the most sense based off what I've read and experienced is that we got involved because of politics and being afraid of the whole continent of Asia becoming super powerful. And I know that we did some really bad things over there. I'm not familiar with the title, but massacre, I'm not surprised at all. I learned about, we used chemical warfare. I feel so bad about it because Vietnam is such a beautiful country that I would love to visit. I hate that my country's history hurt your country.
Unfortunately, I don't know a lot about the Vietnamese perspective, but I think one of the big things that stands out in my mind was the US bombings and also the dropping of Agent Orange, trying to clear all the forests. Because I can imagine that probably left a significant impact on Vietnam. I'm a little bit familiar with kind of the North versus South, the Communist North, and the US Allied South.
You were a really good student, right?
I remember that was one of the times I paid attention the most. Because
wow.
I think it was around the 60s, 70s, and I really liked that time period. And then I also know on the US side, that was a time where Americans were really protesting the war. Because it was the first war, as I was told by my teacher, to be broadcast on public television. So many Americans watched it and thought it was quite atrocious. I guess another thing that comes to mind is I think people were aware that a lot of civilians were dying.
Ooh, truths about the Vietnam War. I would say the biggest truth, the most controversial one, is that we didn't win the war. We lost it, and we lost it pretty hard. That truth is really hard for a lot of Americans because we want to believe that we're exceptional. We're always the best at everything. And part of that truth is just that sometimes wars are not worth fighting.
I think that we lost the war. I think it's a sore subject in US politics because I think the general consensus amongst Americans is that we lost because we did support the South and the South didn't win the war. Also, many Americans thought that the war was a waste of our time. It became a kind of reference for a long failed war.
That is not a hard question. I like to think that I would have been on the side of protesters. I don't necessarily think that it was our business to get involved with the Vietnamese government and what they want to do with their country. I think the Vietnamese people should be the ones to determine their own fate.
I think this is really interesting because I went to Kent State. Kent State is really famous because that was the site of a pretty big anti-Vietnam protest. Every year, our school takes like 2 hours where we don't have any classes. There's a memorial every year because many young people at the time were against the war. So they protested on the campus. Actually, the National Guard came and shot at them. And so 4 students died. Yeah, it was a pretty famous point in our history. And I think since I went to that school, it was very much something I heard a lot about. And the students who died there, where they died is marked on the campus. So I don't know, maybe because of my experiences, and I think my history teacher in high school also explained more objectively about the war. I kind of think I would be against it.
On the side of America, hopefully our education system will get a little bit better, so we'll learn more about places. So I think that just by knowing where these places are and learning more about the actual context of what was happening, people will be more sympathetic, hopefully. And as our country grows more diverse and people get to know more Vietnamese neighbors and friends, hopefully they'll learn more about everything that happened and just be curious about it. I would want everyone in the audience to know that there are Americans out there who care about you. There are Americans who are a bit ignorant, but I promise there's a lot of people with open minds who want to learn and help you.
I would love to visit Vietnam someday. It seems like a really beautiful country, great food, vibrant culture. I hope that I can see Ho Chi Minh City for myself, and I hope that we can be friendly to each other and get along for the rest of eternity.
Stay safe, everyone. I kind of would like to go to Vietnam one day and learn a little bit more about the culture and I guess the Vietnamese perspective on history. So hopefully I will be there one day.
Chào tạm biệt.